Earthquakes, they're top of mind for most Utahns after we felt that 5.7 magnitude quake in Magna just over a week ago. And we've seen multiple aftershocks, so we're still feeling them, and earthquake anxiety is a real deal. Okay, let's talk about earthquakes for just a quick second. And as we take a look at the map, it really defines the Wasatch Fault Line, one of our major fault lines, and the Oquirrh Fault Line. Both of these fault lines are important. They're actually how our mountains were formed. But when the quake hit, a lot of us started to worry, which I understand. The ground was shaking. I was frightened as well. So let's break down what exactly is an earthquake. Well, it's a shaking of the ground. But more than that, it is a release of energy in the Earth's lithosphere that causes seismic waves. All right, let's talk about the lithosphere. What is that made up of? Well, you've heard the word plates before, but it's also made up of Earth's crust as well as pieces of the upper mantle. And those plates are always on the move. There are 3 different types of faults when it comes to earthquakes. And as we kind of take a look at those different types of faults, you get an idea of what you're dealing with.
A normal fault happens when plates stretch apart. A reverse fault is about contractions or earth squeezing together when you have one plate moving on top of another. And a strike slip is when 2 plates horizontally rub against each other.
So how does our most recent quake compare to Utah earthquake history? Well, here's a look at Utah's strongest quakes. The one that takes the cake was back in 1901 in Richfield. It was a magnitude 6.5, and our largest quake, the most recent before the one in Magna, was in 1992 in St. George, a 5.8 magnitude quake down there, and then that 5.7 that hit Magna. But Magna is a hotbed of activity because back in 1962, they also saw a magnitude 5.2, so similar circumstances in that area just spanned out over several years and decades. As you look at some of those other numbers, you can see our highest numbers, only that 6.5. That's the highest earthquake Salt Lake City has seen, but it's definitely been significant in the way of earthquake history in Salt Lake. Earthquake anxiety is normal. We all have been dealing with it, and the aftershocks can be jarring. Some can last for a long time and others very, very quick, but they're still happening. So we talked to an expert because this is all normal.
My name is Jamie Farrell, and I'm a seismologist at the University of Utah Seismograph Stations.
Jamie is an awesome scientist and has the latest numbers from that Magna quake when it comes to aftershocks, and let me tell you, they might surprise you.
Don't be surprised if you continue to feel earthquakes in the next week or so, or a couple of weeks, especially if you live close to Magna or downtown. They're feeling a lot of these earthquakes. I just got the updated numbers so far, and in this sequence so far, we've located 728 total earthquakes in the Magna sequence. Of course, the main shock, the 5.7, we've had 3 magnitude 4 events, 30 magnitude 3 events, and like 122 magnitude 2 events, and then a bunch of other small ones.
Yep, more than 700 aftershocks in Utah. But as time goes on, the rate of occurrence and magnitudes get smaller and smaller. Now our neighbors to the north were just shook by a 6.5 quake south of Stanley, Idaho. I know what you're thinking. That's got to be related to Utah's earthquake, but nope.
No, the only way they're connected is they're both in the western U.S. They're not related to each other at all. The Idaho earthquake, which was magnitude 6.5, was a different type of earthquake. The one we had here in Utah was what we call a normal earthquake, which is accommodating the earth stretching apart.
That 6.5 Idaho quake was a strike slip earthquake, so again, plates rubbing against each other. Now both quakes will continue to produce aftershocks.
They'll both produce aftershocks. The magnitude 6.5 produced about 15 to 16 times more energy than our magnitude 5.7, so it was much larger. Like you said, it was felt throughout a very large region. I think 7 different states have reported feeling it. On the USGS website, there's over 37,000 felt reports.
Sometimes large earthquakes can change the stress in the earth around it. But with our earthquake more than 300 miles away, it's not likely the Idaho quake was triggered by the earthquake in Magna.
Earthquakes are happening every day. The ground is constantly moving below us, but we don't typically feel it. Now, the 5.7 quake, our most recent large earthquake, the most significant in 28 years in Utah, actually was a moderate earthquake. We did see slight damage to buildings, but as you look at the scale of magnitude, you can tell that's kind of right in the middle. An 8.0 or greater would be a major earthquake, and we haven't seen one of those in Utah, and less than 2.5 is the type of earthquake activity we see on a regular basis. A moderate earthquake, though, was jarring enough for it to last for 20 seconds, and most folks along the Wasatch Front could definitely feel it.
For a large magnitude earthquake, like a magnitude 8 or a 9, you need a really large fault to accommodate that much rupture. So, and the faults we have in Utah are just not big enough to produce that large of an earthquake. The largest earthquake that we can, really see in Utah is, around 7 to 7.6, something in that nature. That would be the quote unquote big one.
And that's a strong magnitude with serious damage.
It really can act as a wake-up call for us to remember that we do live in a seismically active area. And, I've been hearing from a lot of people that they've really taken this earthquake to heart and, kind of looked at how they reacted to this earthquake to see how they'll react to an even bigger one that comes in the future. So, we always talk about earthquake preparedness. The better you are prepared, the better you'll fare once the big earthquake happens, when there's a lot more damage than what we saw in this one.
And preparedness also means knowing when to drop and take cover. A reminder, doorways are not the safe practice anymore when it comes to shaking from quakes. It's important to hit the ground and take cover until shaking stops.
Grade yourself on how you did with this last earthquake. If you feel shaking, the best thing to do is drop, cover, and hold, right, until shaking stops. Then kind of take inventory of your surroundings, get out of the building if you have to. But it's very dangerous to try to walk or run while the ground is still shaking. You see a lot of injuries and even deaths from that happening. So if you feel shaking, drop to the ground, get underneath something if you can, and just hold on until shaking stops and then get out of the building.